And this problem is not going to go away. It is going to accelerate. And that means that we have to be as nimble. As aggressive, and as well resourced as those who are trying to break into these systems. Just in sync. Question, thanks, Mr. President. I wanted to ask about two things that were on the agenda at the G7 this weekend. The first was the Islamic State. You said yesterday. Ahead of your meeting with Prime Minister Cameron, that you'd assess what was working and what wasn't. So I'm wondering, bluntly, what is not working in the fight against the Islamic State? And in today's bilateral with Prime Minister Abadi, you pledged to step up assistance to Iraq. I'm wondering if that includes additional U.S. military personnel. Separately, on trade, Chancellor Merkel said today that she was pleased you would get fast-track authority. I'm wondering if that means that you gave her or other leaders here assurance that it would go through the House. And if it doesn't, what does it say about your ability to achieve? Meaningful agreements with Congress for the remainder of your time in office? President Obama, well, on the latter question, I'm not going to hypothesize about not getting it done. I intend to get it done. And, hopefully, we're going to get a vote soon because I think it's the right thing to do. With respect to ISIL, we have made significant progress in pushing back ISIL from areas. In which they had occupied or disrupted local populations. but we've also seen areas like in Ramadai where they're displaced in one place and then they come back in another. And they're nimble, and they're aggressive, and they're opportunistic. So one of the areas where we're going to have to improve is the speed at which we're training Iraqi forces. Where we've trained Iraqi forces directly and equipped them. And we have a train and assist posture, they operate effectively. Where we haven't, morale, lack of equipment, etc., may undermine the effectiveness of Iraqi security forces. So we want to get more Iraqi security forces trained, fresh, well equipped and focused. And President Abadi wants the same thing. So we're reviewing a range of plans for how we might do that, essentially accelerating the number of Iraqi forces that are properly trained and equipped and have a focused strategy and good leadership. And when a finalized plan is presented to me by the Pentagon, then I will share it with the American people. We don't yet have a complete strategy because it requires commitments on the part of the Iraqis. As well, about how recruitment takes place, how that training takes place. And so the details of that are not yet worked out. Question, is it fair to say that additional military personnel U.S. military personnel are of what's under consideration? President Obama, I think what is fair to say is that all the countries in the international coalition are prepared. To do more to train Iraqi security forces if they feel like that additional work is being taken advantage of. And one of the things that we're still seeing is in Iraq. Places where we've got more training capacity than we have recruits. So part of my discussion with Prime Minister Abadi was how do we make sure that we get more recruits in. A big part of the answer there is our outreach to Sunni tribes. We've seen Sunni tribes who are not only willing and prepared to fight ISIL, but have been successful at rebuffing ISIL. But it has not been happening as fast as it needs to. And so one of the efforts that I'm hoping to see out of Prime Minister Abadi, and the Iraqi legislature when they're in session, is to move forward on a National Guard law that would help to devolve some of the security efforts in places like Anbar to local folks, and to get those Sunni tribes involved more rapidly. This is part of what helped defeat AQI, the precursor of ISIL, during the Iraq War in 2006. Without that kind of local participation, even if you have a short-term success, it's very hard to hold those areas. The other area where we've got to make a lot more progress is on stemming the flow of foreign fighters. Now, you'll recall that I hosted a UN General Security Council meeting specifically on this issue. And we've made some progress, but not enough. We are still seeing thousands of foreign fighters flowing into first, Syria, and then, oftentimes, ultimately into Iraq. And not all of that is preventable, but a lot of it is preventable if we've got better cooperation. Better coordination, better intelligence, if we are monitoring what's happening at the Turkish-Syria border more effectively. This is an area where we've been seeking deeper cooperation with Turkish authorities. Who recognize it's a problem but haven't fully ramped up the capacity they need. And this is something that I think we got to spend a lot of time on. If we can cut off some of that foreign fighter flow, then we're able to isolate and wear out ISIL forces that are already there. Because we're taking a lot of them off the battlefield. But if they're being replenished, then it doesn't solve the problem over the long term. The final point that I emphasize to Prime Minister Abadi is the political agenda of inclusion remains as important as the military fight that's out there. If Sunnis, Kurds, and Shia all feel as if their concerns are being addressed, and that operating within a legitimate political structure can meet their need for security, prosperity, non-discrimination, then we're going to have much easier time. And the good news is Prime Minister Abadi is very much committed to that principle. But, obviously, he's inheriting a legacy of a lot of mistrust between various groups in Iraq. He's having to take a lot of political risks. In some cases, there are efforts to undermine those efforts by other political factions within Iraq. And so we've got to continue to monitor that and support those who are on the right side of the issue there. Colleen Nelson. Question, thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned that the US and its European allies have reached a consensus on extending the sanctions against Russia. Is there a consensus, though? About what specifically the next step should be if Russia continues to violate the Minsk agreement. And also, can you deter Russian aggression in other parts of Eastern Europe without a permanent US troop presence? And separately, I wanted to ask you about the possibility that the court battle over your actions on immigration could extend late into your term. Do you think that there's anything more that you can do for the people? Who would have benefited from that program and now are in limbo? And how do you view the possibility of your term ending without accomplishing your goals on immigration? President Obama, on Ukraine and Russia and Minsk, there is strong consensus that we need to keep pushing. Russia to abide by the terms of the Minsk Agreement, we need to continue to support and encourage. Ukraine to meet its obligations under Minsk that until that's completed, sanctions remain in place. There was discussion about additional steps that we might need to take if Russia working through separatists, doubled down on aggression inside of Ukraine. Those discussions are taking place at a technical level, not yet at a political level, because I think the first goal here going into a European Council meeting that's coming up is just rolling over the existing sanctions. But I think at a technical level, we want to be prepared. Our hope is that we don't have to take additional steps because the Minsk agreement is met. And I want to give enormous credit to Chancellor Merkel, along with President Hollande, who have shown extraordinary stick-to-itiveness and patience in trying to get that done. Ultimately, this is going to be an issue for Mr. Putin. He's got to make a decision. Does he continue to wreck his country's economy and continue Russia's isolation in pursuit of a wrong-headed desire to recreate the glories of the Soviet Empire? Or does he recognize that Russia's greatness does not depend on violating the territorial integrity and sovereignty of other countries? And as I mentioned earlier, the costs that the Russian people are bearing are severe. That's being felt. It may not always be understood why they're suffering. Because of state media inside of Russia and propaganda coming out of state media in Russia and to Russian speakers. But the truth of the matter is that the Russian people would greatly benefit. And, ironically, one of the rationales that Mr. Putin provided for his incursions into Ukraine was to protect Russian speakers there. Well, Russian speakers inside of Ukraine are precisely the ones who are bearing the brunt of the fighting there. Economy has collapsed. Their lives are disordered. Many of them are displaced. Their homes may have been destroyed. They're suffering. And the best way for them to stop suffering is if the Minsk Agreement is fully implemented. Oh, immigration. With respect to immigration, obviously. I'm frustrated by a district court ruling that now is winding its way through the appeals process. We are being as aggressive as we can legally to, first and foremost, appeal that ruling. And then to implement those elements of immigration executive actions that were not challenged in court.